Alright, we're here with something a little bit different. I decided it would be a good idea to make a tier list based on my favorite games, especially with Brilliant Diamond and or Shining, whatever. But they're right here. We're not, obviously not going to list these, and this is kind of going to be a pseudo 300 sub special, I guess. I usually don't like to do these because it's just a number and I just kind of make these for fun, but I felt like it was kind of owed as a thank you. And this is a topic I've been really wanting to talk about, and I'm even I have started going through all the games, not just the mainline games, but all the side games as well, recently over on Twitch. So if you do want to check it out, I'll put the link. You don't have to, of course, but we're gonna be going into immediately. We're going to begin with F because I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't think there's a single Pokemon game that I would put down there. It's kind of one of those things where even though I hate some of the games in what they tried to do with the series, and ultimately I don't really enjoy some aspects of them, I feel like ultimately that doesn't make them bad games. None of these games are bad games. I'm just going to start out right away. Some of them are not as good as a lot of people say, which of course is opinion, and some of them are way better than they think, which is of course opinion. But we'll begin into, of course, the first. We of course have green. Now I'm going to state right here that green, blue, red, and yellow are basically going to be put into the same cycle, because while technically red and green is different from blue if we're going based on the Japanese version, they all kind of do the same things. The glitches, while different, are still prevalent enough to where a casual playthrough will be basically the same. And at the same time, I don't really care about the region differences here. I played all of them. I know what to expect. And it's one of those things where I look at it as yellow has this interesting aspect of being able to collect different Pokemon, go on a different journey. But yellow is actually, in my opinion, slightly worse overall than red and blue, and green technically, but at the same time it's so minimal that I'm not gonna get into it too much. But I'm gonna talk about what is really good about the Kanto games. One, the Kanto games are really good at giving you a great starting point. You of course have the 3 starters, which evolve into radically different Pokemon, but at the same time easy enough Pokemon to pick up and play the game, which is great because the starters allow you to build your team. And Kanto is one of those games, any one of the Kanto games, where you can build your team and have fun building it. That's what makes Pokemon fun for me personally, is when you're able to individually choose your team members, have fun, and ultimately have something drastically different than your playthrough before. The replayability on Kanto games is actually very underrated, except there's a problem with a lot of Pokemon in the game. Poison types are pretty much screwed, mostly due to, of course, Psychics being pretty dominant. A lot of the Pokemon you're just not going to use, even if they're version exclusives, such as Meowth. You would use Meowth because it's a fast attacker, but Meowth doesn't get Slash until like 40s, and Persian doesn't get it until like the high 40s, or I think it's mid 40s actually, with Meowth gaining 30 something. And you're not going to wait for that evolution, which makes that Pokemon kind of fall off, and you'll probably end up switching normal types to Snorlax, or maybe Tauros if you're lucky enough to find one. But when it comes down to it, there's a lot of Pokemon that are limited based on the niche kind of weirdness that is Gen 1 specifically, which, while it hurts it, at the same time, it doesn't necessarily make it too bad of an experience. So I'm just gonna go out and say I'm gonna put it right below. Well, technically there's a middle, but I'm gonna put these right here right now. And specifically, the reason I want to say this is, while Kanto is not the best region, it is probably the one region where you can go and do stuff differently and still have a fun time. There's only a few places where I think Kanto suffers more than almost any other generation. The dungeons kind of suck, to be honest. Seafoam Island's kind of lame, even though it's not the worst in there. Rock Tunnel is without a doubt the worst dungeon in Pokemon history. It's just kind of a time waster for time wasting sakes, which you can almost apply the same thing for Viridian Forest, but it's to kind of level up your Pokemon and teach the player, hey, you're going to be going into areas like this later, Mount Moon for example, where there'll be trainers, there'll be Pokemon to catch, and there'll be items and so on and so forth. It's worth it to explore. Rock Tunnel, it's not worth it to explore besides the experience of, you know, fighting trainers Pokemon. Otherwise, not really worth it. Rock Tunnel is just kind of a waste of time to me. But then there's stuff like Power Plant, which has a ridiculous encounter rate. Same with Diglett's Cave, or Tunnel, whatever. Some of the Pokemon are completely inaccessible in a normal playthrough for normal sakes, like Mr. Mime, Jinx being traded, of course, and trade evolutions. If you don't have another copy, you're kind of screwed, which really sucks because Gengar, of course, being the mascot, is one of my favorite Pokemon, and Alakazam is really strong. You have Machamp, which is cool to mess with, even though it's fighting type and fighting types suck, but that's also another detriment of the Gen 1 games. Fighting types, poison types, bug types, and a mishmash of a couple other types are just really bad. Flying being one of them. Flying, while it does have Drill, Peck, and Fly, some of the Pokemon just get stuck with a Wing Attack, which is 35 power, which is awful. It's just miserable. And then normal types, some of the normal types get really screwed by their own type, because Body Slam is a TM in this game, and everyone wants that good stab move. Every single normal type. Even Pokemon that aren't normal types want that move. So it really sucks for normal types for in-game purposes. And competitively, this is probably the most luck-based competitive you can have. Having played RBY for a long time, it's probably the one where I would say your game can sometimes just completely flip on itself, more so than any other generation. Like Thunder Wave, of course, is prevalent to the point of frustration. Sleep is broken because you don't wake up immediately and are able to attack. You have to wait a turn, which allows you to be put back to sleep. You have a bunch of weird interactions in the game, such as, of course, Toxic Leech Seed, which I think is actually a pretty cool thing, but it's one of those things that's just weird. Move pools, of course, are very detrimental to certain Pokemon as well. One of them that's pretty obvious right at the start is Venusaur. Doesn't get Sleep Powder until 50s, so it's a little up there. There's also the Thunderbolt TM being prevalent really early in the game, and the only electric type that can technically use it at that time would be Voltorb right before Rock Tunnel, and of course Pikachu that you can catch in Viridian Forest, or your Pikachu will already have it if you're playing Yellow. When it comes down to it, I feel like the limiting factors kind of put it into a negative aspect for a lot of people, but at the same time, it was the start, and being honest, for how meh of an experience you can sometimes get, I still have a lot of fun, and I still think they are a great baseline. They're not bad. They're not great. They're just good. They're just a great start to a massive series that I've come to love, and while I will always stand by them as worth playing, there's better experiences in the series, so this is why they're in B for sure. And also, if you can tell, I'm going to be talking a lot about these. So, we're going with Gold, Silver, and Crystal next, of course, being Gen 2. We're going to be talking about our first separation here. Gold, Silver, and Crystal are going to be separated from each other, and while a lot of people would argue that Crystal is not as different as Gold and Silver is, I disagree wholeheartedly. I think Crystal fixes some of the issues that are prevalent in Gold and Silver, and at the same time, it doesn't. Gold and Silver suffer from what I like to call too much with too little. They like to give you so much to do, and yet Johto is too little of a region to satisfy me completely in any capacity. Johto is a pretty miserable region until the remakes are Gold, Soul, Silver, and in Gen 2 it is pretty much just go through, beat stuff up, oh hey, Kanto in a terrible state, and then you go and fight Red. Gold and Silver is kind of a, I won't say a miserable experience, but it's definitely one of those experiences where, while it adds a lot of stuff, I feel like Johto being the region it's in is not to me, that fun of a region. You start, of course, in basically you go from Newbark to Cherry Grove to Union, or not Union, to Violet, and basically you end up copying the same path as Generation 1, except it differs and it's a little shorter in every aspect. Instead of fighting a cave immediately in the first generation, you're going in for Radiant Forest. And instead of fighting a cave for the second generation, as the second dungeon, you're fighting a forest. They literally flipped it. It wasn't that hard. But overall, there are some cool aspects. I like the Dark Cave idea, being that type of separate. It's done very poorly here, but it's a decent idea. You have Mount Mortar, which is kind of almost post-game content for most of it. Though you could technically do it as soon as you get Waterfall, and you, of course, beat the 8th gym. There's the Seafoam Islands, which I think are a better version of what is Seafoam. I almost said something else, but it's a better version. And also there's Burnt Tower, which is an interesting dungeon. There's a couple interesting aspects. You, of course, have the first Ghost Gym Leader, which sucks because you don't even see a Mr. Revis in there. You have the normal type Gym Leader, which for a lot of people is a difficulty spike. It's a little early for a normal type because a lot of people don't know matchups, and even then you don't have access to a fighting type unless you're playing Crystal with the Odd Egg, or you're going for that much chop you could trade a Drowsy for. When it comes down to it, I can't help but almost put these as lower than Gen 1, but they don't deserve that. They honestly don't deserve that, and I'm gonna put them right here. Technically lower than Gen 1, specifically Gold and Silver. Now, Crystal, I feel, is barely a better game than Generation 1. And this is weird on every, facet if you look at it. But my reasoning for this is specifically comes down to Suicune making Johto slightly more interesting. And we'll see in Heart Gold Soul Silver, that's all that was needed, was a lot more going on in Johto. Johto, you have the rocket stuff going on, and you have the gym challenge, and that's it. There's less Team Rocket encounters. The gym leaders, to me, are very forgettable, mostly because of how weak they are. The Pokemon being used are usually incredibly low level, along with the wild encounters being incredibly low level. And then, at the end of the day, there's not enough based on time, which is one of the big mechanics of Gen 2, is the time of day and the hours and, night-day cycle, which isn't used enough. There are some cool stuff such as Lapras, you have the day siblings, so on and so forth, but it's not used enough to where I look at it as a main mechanic. It's cool, I like it. It allows you to maybe go, oh man, I should wake up in the morning and get Teddy Ursa, that would be cool. Or, oh, Fanfi, I love using Fanfi. But besides that, there's not enough reason to really highlight the mechanic that much, especially since there are a variety of different ways to change the clock. When it comes down to it, the color aspect, because these are not Game Boy Color games, Gen 1, the color aspect is nice. I like most of the colors that are put on. It's basically an upgrade in graphic capabilities. Some of the music is really good. A lot of the audio glitches are gone, which is very nice from Gen 2. Or from Gen 1 to Gen 2, a lot of the audio glitches are gone, which is super nice. You have, of course, breeding, which I think was massively helpful to just explore and kind of get some weird moves on some Pokemon. It was fun to explore. You, of course, had some new legendaries, which I think are way better legendaries overall in design-wise than the ones that were in the previous generation. And while the story kind of suffered from Team Rocket's back and, okay, Team Rocket's dead, go fight Red, at the same time, it was still enough to be a good game. This is not a great game by any means. I think Johto is too far slow, small, and not easily, forming your team as Kanto is, but there's a lot of content here for you to explore. Some of the new Pokemon are really nice, such as Crobat, Steelix, Espeon, Umbreon. Of course, you have Lantern, which I think is one of the best additions in the Johto lineup to the National Dex. Of course, there's Suicune, there's Tyranitar, there's Entei, Raikou for the legendaries, finish those off. You have Skarmory, Xatu. There's so many good Johto Pokemon. And that's why they're even up here, is because Johto is a very underrated national dex to me. But at the same time, there's still a lot of struggles within those games. I happen to think that the early parts are a lot better for Johto versus Kanto in the starting regions, but I feel like Johto kind of falls off after Morty, where you can go, oh, I can go Jasmine to Chuck, or I can go and fight Price, and at the end of the day, they're too weak to be a challenge. That's the problem, is that Gold, Silver, and Crystal, there's not even a chance of being challenged after Morty. Morty, merely because he has a Gengar, could be a challenge if you're unlucky. But even then, you could prevent it. So next we go into Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald are immediately just better right off the gate. I'm going to order these how I like. But when it comes down to it, Hoenn introduced not only a bunch of different aspects, but they also took away mechanics, which is kind of saddening. Technically, the time cycle is still there due to berries being needed, and the battery saves do wear out a lot because of this, but the day and night cycle is now gone, which sucks. Though the Pokegear, Pokenav, is now improved from the Pokegear to the point where it's not terrible, though you still get interrupted pretty much anytime you turn on the game. Especially if you have a Lightning Rod Pokemon in Pokemon Emerald, it becomes obnoxious. But when it comes to Sapphire and Ruby specifically, I happen to like the pacing of the games a lot more. Hoenn is a lot more fleshed out as a region. There are interesting areas to explore that are completely optional, such as the desert. There's, of course, the Regipaths. A lot of the ocean routes are completely optional, such as the water current route. I forget what route it is specifically. And there's also a very interesting set of Pokemon that are hard to get, such as Milotic, of course, being the most obvious one. Kecleon being interesting to first encounter, till you realize it's kind of a bad Pokemon. But also at the same time, the starters, I felt, kind of did a... it's almost like you go from Gen 1 and the starters are really good for the start of the game, and then Gen 2, they're really good somewhat. Chikorita is weak, and technically, in my opinion, Totodile is kind of boring because there's so many other water types in Gen 2, and Cyndaquil kind of gets stuck as, oh, this is my game because fire types are somewhat rare if you're in Crystal, or if you're in Gold Silver, the only other one that matters is Magmar. But when it comes down to it, the starters in Gen 3, specifically Hoenn, is fantastic. You, of course, get the firefighting type, which started that trend. You get the pure grass type, which is the weakest of the bunch, but still incredibly fun to use. Incredibly just fun overall. And you, of course, get Swampert, which is an interesting take on the water type, the bulky water that would eventually define Gen 3 and 4, and later, of course. But when it came down to it, I love the starter trio. It's probably almost my favorite starter trio. It's kind of a tie between Gen 3, 4, and somewhat 7. 7 gets close, but when it comes down to it, I keep saying that, but with regards to Generation 3 in Hoenn specifically, there's a lot of stuff that is fun to explore. I mentioned the desert, but you have the Shoal Cave. I forgot its name for a second, my bad. And there's also other stuff. There's the Windstrait House, which is just a side thing. You don't have to do it, but it's nice. There's also new items, which are fun. One of the things that kind of sucks going with it is there's a lot of HMs, which kind of hurts the game a little bit. But at the same time, I don't mind it because it's still not over 8, which I use 2 HM slaves anyway. So it doesn't hurt me that much, but it's still fun. Generation 3, it started off well with Ruby and Sapphire, and of course Emerald continued it. I think they're incredibly fun. I think the only thing that would hold it back is probably so many water routes, which doesn't hurt it as much you would think because they increase the surfing speed, which is pretty cool. But considering it's one of the main themes, I don't harp on it too much. One of the things that I will say really sucks with Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald is kind of just TMs overall are designed to make you weaker. And this is something that is kind of in Gen 2 that I didn't mention, but in Gen 2 it's less noticeable. But in Gen 3 they really start going, hey, the electric type gym leader gives you Shockwave, even though literally across the street is the casino where you can gamble for Thunderbolt, which is the first hint that they start handing out TMs that are a little too weak, in my opinion, to really matter for what they are. I totally support giving Shockwave at the third gym leader because 60 power is strong at that point, but even though Thunderbolt's right next to it is just confusing to me. But there's also such things as Rock Tomb, which to be honest, is a terrible move when it's introduced. There's certain Pokemon that I think are really bad, such as Beautifly and Dustox. They're kind of like Beedrill and Butterfree again. Very weak overall. Vespiquen gets forgotten all the time. I like such things as Ludicolo, but I don't really like Shiftry. The Grass Dark type really hurts it, and it's not that interesting to me. Mightyena is annoying as fuck if you're using her Rolts. And of course there is Linoon, which is kind of the replacement for the Raticate and the Furret family, which, I mean, whatever. It's the more forgettable of the three to me. The Flyer is definitely better for sure versus Pidgey and Hoothoot, which, yeah, that's funny. But Swellow or Tailo, whichever one, is really fun. I think Hoenn has probably the most fun region decks for me. There's a lot of different combinations you can do. You have Manectric, and you have, of course, the staples such as Magneton you can find. You have, of course, Gardevoir was introduced. You have Aggron, you have Claydol, you have, Flygon. I almost said Dragonfly. You have Flygon, and it's cool. Like, it's just a cool time. I really think Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald are really strong. Now, I don't like to talk bad about games, but I'm going to talk about Fire Red and Leaf Green in a less than positive light. And a lot of people will be kind of met because a lot of people were introduced to Pokemon with Fire Red and Leaf Green. And they were introduced, and they stand by that this is a better Kanto. I think Fire Red and Leaf Green had a lot of potential. I still think they are decent, and at times they are very good. There's a lot of balance issues from Generation 1 that's fixed in Generation 3 that makes Kanto a better experience. But at the same time, there's a lot of problems that were not addressed properly. One of them being Venusaur's use as a Pokemon. Stuck with Razor Leaf for most of the game. If you want to use Frenzy Plant of all things, there you go. You can use Giga Drain, I guess. But like at the end of the day, Venusaur's screwed over. Though it does get Sleep Powder a lot earlier, but it's just screwed over as a type. Charizard getting Metal Claw to kind of get by the Geodude and Onix hurdle named Brock, I don't support, because it's one of those things of giving a starter just enough to bypass its trouble areas, which at that point you should be using Ember anyway, because it'll be stronger and you might burn it. But when it comes regards to that, you supported one starter to get it past its hurdle, and you actually hurt Venusaur in this regard, because your crit chance of the original Gen 1 mechanics is gone, and it should have gone a stronger move. It did not learn Petal Dance, I don't think, in Gen 3, so it was quite an awful experience to use Venusaur, which sucks. Also, one of the things that I think really hurts Fire Red and Leaf Green is forcing the region dex, national dex evolution problem, being such as Golbat can't evolve into Crobat, Onix into Steelix, and there's only a couple Pokemon, but it was very annoying. First time I played it, I thought it would be funny to use a Crobat, and it was not, because I got stuck with a Golbat until the Sevi Islands, and the Sevi Islands in the post-game, which is also a positive. The Sevi Islands, I think, were a nice little bit into kind of the spacer between Cinnabar and, of course, Viridian, being the 7th and 8th gym. There was a nice little spacer. It was really fun to explore new areas that were kind of right off the coast of Kanto. Plus, Moltres definitely needed a better spot than Victory Road to hang out in. When it comes down to it, though, I feel like not enough was changed. I say this as looking at it from a remake perspective. While the Sevi Islands were without a doubt introduced, and those are fun areas and gain access to certain Johto Pokemon, and new evolutions was nice. Some of those evolutions were locked purposefully for that reason, to unlock them later. And the Johto Pokemon, if you had been following the series, weren't that special. It was just, oh, you could finally get them in Generation 3 due to the separation of 2 to 3, the trading anyway. Which, I want to mention that I'm looking at it from a remakes perspective, and these are better games to play, in my opinion, than Generation 1. But it did a lot less than I would actually want from the games. It's basically Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald Kanto version. That's basically it. And while it didn't need to be much more than that, it could have been so much more. It could have been so much better. Could have fixed a lot of the issues I have with Kanto, and yet it doesn't. Rock Tunnel is still there, though at least Rock Slide is now actually a tutor in there, which makes it worth something, I guess. At the end of the day, the remakes are kind of held back by the fact that physical and special split happens literally the next generation, which sucks for ghost types in that game. Gengar, sorry, Shadow Ball sucks for you. And that's also another thing, is the TMs got changed to Shockwave for Surge, and of course you can go Gamble for Thunderbolt, which is fun. Thank you. That was fun to do, but it's also just one of those things of abilities not really being as prevalent as the changes would suggest. Of course, Jolteon can absorb an electric type move, and there are a few that get some useful abilities, but Kanto actually doesn't have a lot of Pokemon that I look at their abilities and go, that's cool. Like, of course, there's Gyarados, which gets a strong one, which actually puts it way higher. But besides the updated move pool, the updated graphics, the updated sound, which to me, this is, of course, a very personal opinion. It doesn't really affect the ranking that much. I don't like how Fire Red and Leaf Green sounds. It's always been a problem I've had with these games, where the way the music is, to me, is slightly worse than Gen 1, which I was willing to excuse Gen 1's sometimes wonky audio glitches because it's on the Game Boy. This is on the Game Boy Advance. This is after how many years at that point? 8 or 6 years, something. In North America, you should be able to properly, of course, handle sound and not have it be very annoying. Though, I do like the Cerulean in Fire Red Leaf Green, but when it comes down to it, I think that's about it. It's a very lackluster remake, which is surprising. But now we're going to get Diamond, Pearl, and we're going to be leaving Platinum out of this discussion because they are actually more different than even Gold, Silver, Crystal is. Diamond and Pearl is a very overrated experience. A lot of people would support that 4th generation is the best generation. I happen to stand by this, but there are still problems with Diamond and Pearl, and in fact, I'm going to immediately put them right here, and we'll get into why right now. One of them, the regional dex fucking sucks in Diamond and Pearl, and a lot of people go, well, it's not that different in Platinum. Platinum barely managed to fix it with its additions. You have missing stuff such as Tropius you can't access even though it's in the regional dex. In Diamond and Pearl, you of course have 2 fire types. You have Infernape and what else? I don't even remember. Like, you can't access Magmortar, can you? I don't think you can. So the fire types get screwed. Electric types aren't as expansive as they are in Platinum, though they're not that bad. Of course, Diamond Pearl has a lot of pacing issues, in my opinion. Snow walking even slower than in Platinum. Slightly slower. It's not that noticeable if you kind of haven't played in a long time, but it is noticeable if you're actually going back and playing it. Cynthia is too strong in Diamond Pearl. Heck, the whole Elite Four is kind of pathetic until you get to Cynthia because the freaking regional dex is garbage. Aaron, or Aaron, whatever, uses a Beautifly and a Dustox. An Elite Four member uses a Beautifly and a Dustox. I shouldn't have to explain any more of why the regional dex sucks. It's awful. It's terrible. Now, there are some really good aspects of Diamond and Pearl. The physical special split made a lot of Pokemon better, such as Sea King, and of course you have Floatzel, which came into the new generation. You of course have Luxray, which didn't get a good move for its physical electric type. which kind of sucks, and it wouldn't get a good move until Gen 5, which really sucks. But we're stuck with Spark on that. You, of course, have the bird being the best bird in... Even though Swallow got close, Staraptor is definitely the best bird. You have some really wonky types that are just fun to use, such as Bronzong being Steel Psychic. Really cool Pokemon. I love Gen 4's designs and typings and just interest I have in those Pokemon, along with Gen 3. They're really cool. I really love forming teams, such as Rotom with the Electric Ghost type. It's always fun. With Levitate, it's really cool. And of course, you have the Legendaries, Dialga and Palkia. Very, very awesome. I love them. Dragon Steel, Dragon Water, really cool. Along with Giratina, of course, being in Platinum. Really cool legendary lineup. And this is also when the event Pokemon thing started to get really big due to Wi-Fi capabilities, which is also something I'll get into. But Diamond and Pearl had a few events that I felt were really, really exciting, because it was the first time you were kind of being given something for being a Pokemon fan, for paying attention to these dates. It was really awesome back in the day. Wi-Fi capabilities, of course, allowed you to battle, which not only allowed you to race your friends and, of course, battle at the end of the day, it allowed you to play competitively a lot easier than, a lot easier. But when it comes down to it, I felt like Diamond and Pearl had a lot of stuff holding it back. In a lot of regards, you walk so damn slow. Oh my god. And there are some Pokemon that are just miserable, such as Kricketune. And also, I totally get it's a fun thing to look back on now. But Diamond and Pearl had some very weird choices for early route Pokemon. I just don't like them. I don't like building a team in Diamond and Pearl. In Platinum, it's fine. There's enough additions in there. There's like 20 some odd additions overall throughout the region before the 8th badge. Makes it bearable. But when it comes down to it, Diamond and Pearl also just did a lot. It did a lot for the series, except not as much as you would think. Of course, the day-night cycle is back. Breeding had been slightly changed. You, of course, have the Poketch, which would eventually be replaced by the full menus. That would eventually come in Generation 5. You have a variety of different other cool stuff, though the contests were definitely better in Gen 3 versus 4. The Poffin stuff I don't like as much as the Berry Blender that would be in Gen 3. Even though it's basically the same thing, I just suck at it a lot more. And there's new evolutions that I think are really cool in Diamond and Pearl, though some of them are inaccessible. Wonder why. But you, of course, have Porygon Z, which I think is really cool. You have Magmortar, Electivire, never got that Jinx evolution, sadly. But you have Tangrowth. Tangrowth. But it's a great example of kind of what Gen 2 was trying to do with new evolutions and being a new game, except it has a lot more of its own identity. Gen 2, the whole entire Gen 2, is a lot like Diamond and Pearl. There's a lot of stuff it was setting out to do to break ground, except it didn't focus enough on different stuff. Gen 2 struggle was its region. Diamond and Pearl was the details. There's a lot of stuff that is missing from there. Platinum fixes basically almost all of it. And I say this as a big fanboy of Platinum. Platinum fixed a lot of the pacing problems I have with the team building. There's a lot more accessible Pokemon. And also with Platinum, I feel like the pacing of levels has been fixed a lot, along with some battles being really challenging. Cynthia, even though it has been lowered in levels, had actually is more of a challenge in Platinum. It is definitely one of those things where it's like, this is the champion, which I enjoy because it's the final battle, basically. Platinum also has access to Giratina as your legendary. Distortion World was really cool back in the day, now it's kind of just an annoyance. The different gym leader order, which kind of changes it up enough, though the puzzles were kind of... Whew. Diamond and Pearl, I think, had the worst puzzles barely. I don't know, Platinum has some pretty bad puzzles. But Diamond and Pearl had you answer math problems for one of its... whatever. But when it comes down to it, I feel Platinum is very well paced. and I can support Platinum being better than Gen 3 overall versus Diamond and Pearl. And that's where the separation comes in. These are very close games overall, but Platinum just has a little bit more fun aspect for me. A lot of fixes, and at the end of the day, walking in snow was 25% faster, so you know what, Platinum gets that S, okay? I'm done arguing. Now we're going to go Heart Gold, Soul Silver, which I am unsure of where to put. Well, obviously it's there, but Heart Gold, Soul Silver was the remake of Gen 2. It was, without a doubt, the best remake experience, and I will argue even after Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, or I'm doing them backwards, aren't I? Whatever. But the Gen 4 remakes are not going to be better than this. The Gen 3 remakes, which is a spoiler, are not better than this. Heart Gold and Soul Silver looked at Gen 2 and what it did, said, you know what? Let me show you. Let me show you what's better. They went the Fire Red and Leaf Green route and added a bit to their own region without completely breaking it, but at the same time adding enough to matter. There's only a couple routes that are added, except it completely changes how you look at Johto. It looks like a normal sized region now. It doesn't look like someone went with a freaking scissors and cut it somewhere along the lines. It actually has a safari zone, which is an interesting aspect, even though it's not what makes the region complete. It's just, it feels a lot bigger. It feels like it matters a lot more than in Generation 2, where, oh, Johto's here. Oh, here's Kanto. Remember Kanto? Here's Kanto. This feels like Johto. Hey, remember Johto? It's slightly different. Hey, remember Kanto? This is the 4th time we're doing Kanto, and we made it. This is the 4th time we made Kanto. A lot of changes. Abilities were, of course, added because of Generation 3, but physical special split makes a lot of Pokemon interesting. You have Yanma that actually gets an evolution from the 4th generation, and this is something that Fire and Leaf Green should have done originally. 4th generation evolutions that you can get the first stage Pokemon in Heart Gold Soul Silver can evolve in the Johto Dex, which is amazing. You get a Licky Tongue on the route east of, what's the ice gym? Mahogany. On the east side, you get a Licky Tongue there. You can evolve into Licky without getting the National Dex. If you trade a Shiny Stone to your Heart Gold Soul Silver, you can evolve that Togetic you got at the beginning of the game for Togekiss before you even need to leave. You don't get stopped and go, hey, wait, something happened. You can't evolve it. Heart Gold and Soul Silver is one of the best games to replay. That's what makes it so fucking special, is that you can go in, you can sit there and get lost in the region again and again and again. It's without a doubt one of the best experiences that Pokemon has ever had. Like, it actually baffles me that there are people that look at these games and go, they were alright. I remember there was a review back in the day when these first came out where Heart Gold and Soul Silver was not a terrible game, but they said a bad game. And it was by someone that thought this was Pokemon 2, which was hilarious. But Heart Gold and Soul Silver introduced basically nothing. I want to point that. It introduced basically nothing, except it is kind of the final version of what every single Pokemon game has been building up to. It is kind of that top of the pyramid type of thing, where it was like, hey, this is the finalized version. This is what we've been doing. This is what we've been working for. And it was fun. You had the Pokélocker, which was kind of a niche thing. It was really cool, I thought, for its time. But I also lost, like, I don't know how many Pokemon doing that, so that was kind of bad. But at the same time, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, while they are harder games and the TMs were definitely more limiting, I felt that the Pokemon, the region, and both regions were just better overall. The game had some fantastic looking areas that still are amazing to this day, even compared to Black and White. So when it comes down to it, I think Heart Gold Soul Silver deserves, I'm going to argue S+. I'm going to argue there. They are that much fun. They are the best in the series, which as of right now, we don't know how Arceus is. I'm going to tell you right now, Gen 4 remakes aren't going to touch that. I can already tell you right now. Because it doesn't look like they're fixing any of the Sinnoh problems. But we'll see. Maybe it will. Maybe it will. But next one would be, of course, Pokemon Black, Pokemon White, Gen 5. A lot of people at launch of Gen 5 hated it. A lot of people didn't like the changes to the regions. You unable to use Gengar or Lapras or Pikachu even. Your region dex, you were stuck with the new 156 Pokemon, which I recently went through and found that you can only actually use about 120 of them in a normal playthrough because of version exclusives. Level 50 evolutions or higher. My god, level 64 for your stupid pseudo legendary. Why? But when it comes down to it, Black and White did a lot. The presentation overall was a lot better, not only with the animated sprites, but just how they look. Competitive was made a lot better. You had cool items that I thought really changed how I thought of Pokemon, being the Eviolite. You, of course, had weird Pokemon that I don't really like, such as the Alamola, which I can never say or even spell. You have Cofagrigus, which was banned for on the GTS for a long time. I don't know if that ever got fixed. I never wanted to trade one, but that was actually banned because of how it's spelled. But when it came down to it, I felt like while Black and White was definitely introducing a lot that would increase presentation, sound. I love the music of Gen 5. Overall pacing, story actually started to matter with Black and White, in my opinion. It suffered a lot in the Pokemon that were there. And I say this being somewhat of a fan of a lot of the Gen 5 designs. But your start in Black and White was hurt because they had to introduce every little new Pokemon. This is a grassy area. Here's 3 Pokemon. Here's a cave area. We have 2 Pokemon for you. They had to introduce. And so a lot of them feel very weak, in my opinion, of designs. And it's not even like the obvious ones such as Vanillix or Trubbish or Garbodor, whatever you want to say. I like those. I think those are interesting, but it's kind of like Kling Clang. I don't like it. It's basically Magneton 2, except Gears. Woo. But, and you have like other stuff that is obviously was probably meant to be an evolution, such as Alamola, which I already mentioned, should have been a Love Disc evolution. One of the things also is that water types are somewhat rare in Black and White, besides the Elemental Monkey, Semi-Poor, and of course Oshawott as the starter. You of course can get a couple of the other water types through different stuff such as the turtle, Teratoga, I never know how to say it or how it's spelled right now, but there's a lot of limiting factors to building your team in Black and White. I feel ultimately that they did so much for what I love of Pokemon, except they just messed it up slightly. And that's the thing, it was just a slight mess up. These are probably the games that I've played the least, besides Let's Go. Black and White, I actually played White first, so we're gonna put that there, but I feel like they did so much for the series moving forward, and it's actually the last time I saw true evolution in a Pokemon game that mattered. But it wasn't enough because they made 156 new Pokemon, and I felt tired of that region, especially since so many of them are flying types. Why are there so many? And Unfezzed's so bad. Why is Unfezzed so bad? But when it comes down to it, there are some really cool Pokemon, Darmanitan, and at this point I don't want to continue to dog on it or even support it. I feel that it's here. There's a lot of stuff going for it. There's a lot of great stuff going for it. But there's a lot of bad stuff in it. Also, the Elemental Monkeys I really hate because they're supposed to be the see no evil shit. And it's not very obvious in their design, but they were like, oh, but I hate it. So Black 2 and of course White 2 have a very interesting gimmick, being of course Karam, but at the same time is Unova again, which allows us to do a different thing, similar to actually what would be later in the series with Sun and Ultra Sun. But when it comes down to the end of Generation 5, I felt like White 2 and Black 2 are better games to play and replay, but they introduced basically nothing else. And also, Pokestar Studios fucking sucks. Whoever decided that was a good idea, fuck you. But when it comes down to it, I'm gonna do this. I honestly think these are very underrated games. They have a lot more Pokemon access, which fixes my biggest problem with Black and White. And being that they are sequels, all the presentation is there. The new story being kind of weaker is fine because it's a continuation, and you are carried off of Black and White story. With Black 2 and White 2 being, of course, the continuation, it allows me to go, you know what, it can get away with it. It can get away with it. Being that you have access to plenty of Pokemon, there's like 350 that you can have access throughout the main story or something stupid. I don't actually know. It's like, I don't know, it's like 200. It's a ridiculous amount, which is a lot better than the 110, 120 that you can get. But it is fun to form your team if you want to go, man, I can drop my starter and get a Azumarill because Azumarill is actually a great physical attacker. You can do that. You want to use Ampharos because it's been literally a decade since you used it in Gen 2. You can do that. Or Heart Gold, Soul Silver, I guess you could technically have used it. But I'm saying that White 2 and Black 2 are actually incredibly fun to change and make teams. In-game teams. And also competitively, this is when some additions were added. Dream World stuff, which, by the way, the Dream World metagame back in the day. Chandelure with Shadow Tag. Because we thought that was going to happen. That didn't, for good reason. But when it comes down to it, the Dream World stuff was improved. You have the Joint Avenue, which I thought was very interesting. And the cool part is that you can do it offline. Not as well as online, but you can still do it offline, which was cool. You had a variety of different features that were added and changed. And you have the whole start of the game, which I think the start of the game was the weakest aspect of White and Black. It's fixed here, with the weakest aspect being the actual last part of White 2 and Black 2. Being that some of the dungeons are just really stupid in how they're laid out, and also how they reference White and Black at the end of the game. But there's also just fun parts that I really wish were brought back from White 2 and Black, or from Black and White into the sequels, but we're not, which, I mean, you can't win them all, but they are definitely great games that I stand by. If you haven't played them, I recommend it. Now we go to X and Y. A lot of people don't. A lot of people will stand by as X and Y as when it started to go down, and at some points I do agree. I do agree that X and Y has a lot of problems, but we're going to discuss this right here. X and Y are fantastic in what they were trying to set out to do, and that is being the next physical evolution for Pokemon games to upgrade. Of course, the Fairy type was introduced, which when I first heard about it was not happy about. I'll be honest, was not happy about it, but I learned to love it. I learned to love X and Y because of the Pokemon introduced being so fucking cool. And at the end of the day, X and Y was easy enough, but you can challenge yourself your own way. I love making your own difficulty in games where it's like no jumping, no shooting, no fire types, or fire type only. I love doing stuff like that, and X and Y started to become XP share. XP share, you can turn it on, easy mode. Me, I turn that shit off every single time. I turned it off at launch. I've never used that thing in Gen 6. Fuck that. We go in the traditional route, and you get points for, or experience points for catching Pokemon, which is finally a reason to catch all the Pokemon you could see, though I only catch one of each and just kill the rest because I'm a mass murderer. But you also had horde battles, which were so cool and interesting. Too bad they're gone. You had sky battles, which were stupid and gimmicky. I also didn't mention triple battles, which, yeah, no one cares. I didn't even mention double battles from Gen 3, whoops. But when it comes down to it, I felt that X and Y actually evolved on a lot of stuff. The Mega Evolutions is something that I look back on, and they were actually very, very interesting. And they chose Pokemon that were perfect for it. I hate that Charizard got 2, but I mean, eventually we would see Pidgeot, of course, get it. You had Beedrill. This, of course, is in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But you had some Mega Evolutions such as Lucario that made it so much cooler. They made broken Pokemon for you to use with a little bit of a Digimon aspect to it, which, I mean, is hit or miss to me. But with regards to X and Y, I felt like the pacing was good, while the story kind of sucks just because it's Pokemon story and they stopped caring after Black and White. I still managed to love these games, even though for a long time I did not feel that way at first. I felt like X and Y, while they introduced the fairy type and it was the first game that looked 3D properly and actually acted 3D, I felt that there was enough here for it to be fun. And I have played these. I played these last year. I played X. I always play X. But I played these last year, and my opinion actually changed radically. I would have put it down here in B before that. But having gone back to it after playing all these games, sorry, not these, but all these games, I went, man, this is actually very underrated. These games are really good. And now, we're going to get into Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby. So, I'm not going to put these here. I'm just going to move them so we can talk about them real quick because I'm going to put them in a very rough spot. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, of course, remakes in the same vein as Heart Gold Soul Silver and Fire Red Leaf Green. They have Gen 6 components, which makes some Pokemon better, such as Azumarill, and makes some Pokemon worse. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but there are some. Mawile is actually interesting as a fairy type. Allows it to do some wonky stuff versus fighting types, even though it's like steel as well. But also, new Mega Evolutions were added. The primal versions of Groudon and Kyogre, which I thought were really cool, actually. It was like, oh shit, these legend. What the fuck? You already had Kyogre, which was broken as fuck, and now it's even more broken. Why? Why would you do that? That's so cool. Rayquaza's broken. Fuck that. But Rayquaza also looks like the most... It's one of those things that it looks so over-designed that I look at it and go, I hate that. But at the same time, I really love it. I think Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire introduced enough to keep my attention, but there's nothing really groundbreaking like Heart Gold and Soul Silver. There's, of course, new additions, but they are minimal at best. And while there's more challenges that can be, of course, accomplished in those games, I actually think these are the least innovative games that have happened in a long time. And it's actually a step down from even the original Hoenn games. I felt that the camera angle actually didn't support a lot of the areas, and while it looked nice and it looked cool, I felt it was too much in the same vein of Fire Red and Leaf Green. I did those backwards. Leaf Green and Fire Red. Fire Red, Leaf Green, that way. Sorry, but it was too much of this versus this, which is exactly my problem with it, but they are still way better games than some of these. When it comes down to it, I felt like Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are worse than their Hoenn counterparts, but they're so close. They're so close to being so good. Which really, it kind of hurts putting them there because I almost want to put them above Ruby and Sapphire and keep Emerald better, but that would be so mean to Ruby and Sapphire. Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald did really good with Hoenn. These things just copied it and put a Gen 6 coat of paint over it. Not my preferred style. Now we get to Generation 7. I'm going to be perfectly honest, Generation 7 is the one I have the least to talk about. I was completely checked out for this whole generation. I stand by that this generation of games is actually pretty lackluster, but I've been very harsh on them in the past, and I'm going to talk about Sun and Moon, and we're also going to be talking about Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon at the same time because they're so similar, and that's a big problem with these four games. So, Sun and Moon introduced special variants of Pokemon, Alola Pokemon, which I thought was very gimmicky at first, and then I loved it. I loved the type of idea, though they kind of did some weird stuff with the stupid totem stuff. I didn't like that. Personally, the totem Pokemon were either vastly broken or too pathetically easy. Even gym leaders were like, oh, this could be a challenge. No, Totem Pokemon were a flip of the coin. They were miserable at times. Vikavolt. But when it comes down to it, Sun and Moon to me feels very lackluster in its game, which really sucks because I love the starter trio. It's the first time where I looked at the starter trio and went, all three of these are pretty fun and unique. Incineroar, Primarina, there we go. I kept trying to say the pre-evolution of that. And Decidueye, I think they are incredible. I think they're really fun starters. I think some Pokemon are very interesting to use. And they're actually, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are very fun to replay. But Sun and Moon are kind of those things that, unlike Black and White, which has its own identity and what it did, Sun and Moon particularly doesn't have its own identity separate from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which actually makes them worse games in a lot of ways. A lot of its limitation. The games are incredibly dull at the beginning to play. Like, I'm talking, this is the worst Pokemon games for the beginnings. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon did slightly better with the dialogue, but Sun and Moon is just such a miserable start. The first hour is miserable. I'm just sitting there like, oh, come on, hurry up. I want to go. But Sun and Moon still introduced enough cool stuff. Too bad it's kind of one of those things of, I don't care enough about these games to really interest myself enough to explore. I have to put them down here. I have to. They do not do enough for me. That's the biggest problem. Now we get to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which did a lot better in a lot of aspects, except it's kind of a pointless sequel. And that's kind of the problem we have. So we're going to immediately put them right over here. And I say Generation 7 never held my interest because it doesn't. It doesn't hold my interest even enough to really just talk about them. Which is weird because I literally talked about so many of these for so little time, or so much time, and some of them so little, but it's still one of those things of I just cannot focus enough to be interested. So let's get into Let's Go. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Just go here. We're not going to talk. No, we're going to talk about. Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu are, of course, based on the the Pokemon Go phenomenon that hit back all those years ago, 5 years almost at this point. And while I would love to say that these games have substance and are interesting, there's nothing there. This is purely This is the Pokemon game you show to kids to teach them how to learn Pokemon, even though Pokemon is pathetically easy anyway. That's the point. It's kind of like, here's the beginner option. There's already beginner options. Why? And I hate the fact that there's just so much potential there. You have the special, like, starter moves, which were interesting and made Pikachu and Eevee not horrible. And I loved being able to catch pretty much all the Kanto and some Alola Pokemon, or Alola versions of Kanto Pokemon. You, of course, it was a different metagame for sure, and it was actually more of a remake than Fire Red and Leaf Green was, but it was so unfun to play to me. It felt stripped down, and it's also gonna be my complaint for Sword and Shield, is it felt super stripped down, except there was no additions to it. It felt very weak as a game, let alone a Pokemon game, which I don't even expect that much. I mean, like, anything above this is decent or better. Like, Fire and Leaf Green are decent. Anything above that is already, like, good. This is great, this is fantastic, and this is brilliant. But, like, below this is just average. They're so forgettable. That's the problem here. You could also just cheat your way with stupid candies. Basically, you do not have to try. The only reason you pick these games up, Shiny Hunt, because it's a lot easier and also more fun, in my opinion, to Shiny Hunt for these two. But recommendation, Never pick these up at 60 bucks. Never. Please don't. And also, can I just say I'm really tired of Kanto? Just really tired. I love Kanto a lot more than Johto. I like Hoenn better in Sinnoh, but Kanto just needs to stop. Alright, now time for the big beast. Sword and Shield. I can't talk about these three because they're not out. Sword and Shield are games that I look at and I see a lot of problems. I see Pokemon's refusal to evolve as a series. I see not only that, but I see problems in what is counted as new areas to explore. The wild area is very interesting and definitely had my attention at launch, but I stopped caring after a while. The DLC for this fucking sucks. I hate the fact that these games got DLC. While the Galarian forms of the legendary Pokemon and different Pokemon was really cool, I really hate the fact that they limited Pokemon so drastically just because they were so fucking lazy. I hate the fact that these games, even with all those problems associated with it, had a very bad starter trio. I don't like Cinderace how it is, and I don't like the water type, which I'm forgetting the name. Not Rillaboom, Inteleon, yeah, I think. But is that its name? I don't know. But and that really sucks because while Rillaboom is interesting and I like it as a Pokemon, the rest of the Pokemon for the starter trio I don't like them. I don't like any of them. Sobble's terrible. I don't like Rabu. Like, I just don't like how those two are designed and what they're supposed to do, which sucks because there's actually a lack of special attackers in Sword and Shield. It's more like there's a bunch of physical attackers versus special attackers, which really sucks because that means Inteleon's the best starter by necessity. So when it comes down to it, it really hurts me to say this. I still like these games. I still think that these games are fun, and they're definitely the ones I've played the least, mostly because they've only been out for a short amount of time in comparison to the rest. But when it comes to Sword and Shield, they didn't add anything, and yet I still like the really just what is there. I like what's there. It could have been a fantastic game, and I look at its potential more than what I feel about the games, because Galar is such an interesting place, and I felt like they did a good job of making it feel like an actual new region. It's the same thing with Sun and Moon. Why I put it up here instead of down here is the regions actually felt new. They felt like they mattered. They weren't just, oh, this is over here. It has a snow area, desert area. No, this felt very interesting with the wild area, and it felt very interesting on some of the routes. Too bad it's so fucking basic, it hurts. Now, I actually really struggle to put this anywhere, Sword and Shield, because I'll change my mind in like 10 minutes. But I'm gonna have to go here, which it really hurts me because I feel like these games are somewhat better in so many different regards, but it's just that these games get shit on by so many people, and there's a lot of good in them. I loved the Pokemon design is probably the biggest one. I feel like if you look at away from the starters, the Pokemon designs in Sword and Shield are fantastic. I love how they look. I love the weird ones, such as Sinistea? I think that's how you say it, the Sinister T thing. Very fun. I love the interesting designs of Zacian, and then like it's just really cool how these designs came. I even like the DLC designs of the Alola of the Galarian forms. Even like Galarian Ponyta is really interesting. You of course have Berserker, which is that's a little weak, but you have the new Pokemon, which I mean, there's of course so many different Pokemon I could point out, but at the end of the day, I feel like the designs push it higher than it really should be. And the wild area is a fun way to experience a co-op Pokemon game, even though it's not truly a original co-op experience. But This is, of course, the first mainline Switch games, and the Switch was made for Pokemon. It just sucks that their first two outings were awful. And even though I say that this outing was awful, it still managed to be a good game because of just enough support and enough substance, just barely enough to matter to me. When it comes to it, I'm gonna leave Sword and Shield there as the worst of A tier. And I feel like this is kind of lopsided now that I look at it. This also means that I put X and Y better than the Hoenn games, which hurts my soul a bit, but I mean, I like the list, actually. I think I supported a lot of my reasonings and thoughts, and my voice is also starting to go because I haven't taken a drink this whole entire hour. But when it comes down to it, I think that I almost want to get rid of D and just put these, but I don't know. I think there's a clear separation of these two for me. Should I move Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? No. I like the way that is, because this is kind of I kind of look at these as the middle ground here of Pokemon games. If I were to look at the best, I would go above Sword and Shield and talk about these games. If I were to talk about the worst games, I would go below Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and go this way. These are kind of exactly in the middle, which also sucks because these are technically the most recent 4 games. We're not talking about these two, but the most recent 4 games. So I feel like Sword and Shield had a lot of potential though, and I'm gonna stand by as being here. And I think that's what really sucks is if you look at it. I even have Diamond and Pearl, which I rode on the hate train of it for a bit, and I still put it above Sword and Shield. That should show how much Sword and Shield could have done. Is that even with its terrible decision making on Pokemon Company's part, it's still there. Mega Ruby enough. Am I okay with that? I kind of want to put it above, but I'll leave it like that. It looks nice. I'm good with this. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's the list. At the end of the day, this of course is my opinion, and my opinion's always right. Do remember that. If you ever have a question in life and you want my opinion, do know I will give you a fact that will automatically make your life way better. If you believe this, then you know I'm right. But when it comes down to it, I think that's my list. We will of course see how these shake up in the later parts of the year, specifically these two, and then of course in 2022 for Arceus Legend. I'm actually excited for Arceus specifically. These, I mean, if I were to take a guess, I'd probably put them in A right now. But at the same time, they're not changing much. They're probably going to be better than Diamond and Pearl, though. Not better than Platinum. That's going to be hard. Ooh. Also, one thing I didn't mention about Gen 4 is the health bars. That's the one thing that puts these back from being, like, really, 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 really good games. Like, 10 out of 10 games. But yeah, the health bars are the problem. And that's something I didn't mention why Black and White is so high, is because it did a lot of streamlining features about that. But there's a lot to go through with each of these games alone. And to do a tier list like this in an overview fashion, it's actually incredibly difficult to get your points across, even if they're very lackluster points as the Johto games for me. But I'm going to take a drink and probably end it off. Have a good one. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you, of course, for 300 subs. Though it makes me depressed that I didn't upload for a very long time, because I'm a lazy bastard and also just couldn't. But thank you guys for hanging out. Tell me in the comments below if you do make it this far. What's your favorite Pokemon game? What's your least favorite? Anything in between. I'm always willing to discuss. Have a good one. Be safe. And as always, I'll talk to you guys later.